Spotlight: Access for All, how DocAccess advances digital equity in the public sector. Speakers: Matt Clemens, CEO of Streamline; Sean Jordison, founder, The Accessibility Guy; and Carter Tem, Accessibility Strategy and Training Lead, Quality Logic.
Hello and welcome. I want to give a special thank you to the Vista Center for putting on SiteTech Global and for bringing us all here together today. My name is Matt Clemens, and I've spent my life as a website developer and working with organizations across the country on how to make their websites and communication more accessible. But today, we're here to talk about one of the hardest problems facing institutions, local governments, universities, and that's document accessibility. Despite all the work and progress that's happened on the web, there's still big gaps when it comes to PDFs, and with upcoming DOJ enforcement and the evolving WCAG standards, it is tough to get all those PDFs compliant. And what's happening out there is very disturbing. In order to be compliant, people are deleting their documents en masse. They're getting rid of historical documents. They're having basically a digital book burning in the name of accessibility and compliance, but it's coming at the cost of transparency. So we as a society face a crisis. Do we somehow use technology to bridge this gap and make accessibility of documents available and available now to stop this? Or do we give up and leave this as a hard and unsolvable problem? Well, we know the answer to that. We know the right answer to that, but it's not easy to do. So I have invited two experts with me today to talk about this problem. First, I'd like to introduce Carter Tem. Carter is a lifelong screen reader user. He's helped develop NVDA. He has helped consult with numerous organizations from Wells Fargo and banking to many others to help them improve their accessibility experience. And he's going to talk about some of the tools available and some of the things we're working on. I also have invited Sean Jordison, who is the accessibility guy on YouTube and has remediated maybe 1 million documents. I don't even know, Sean. How many documents have you remediated?
You know, it's really hard to guess, but this has been my only grown-up job since I was 18 and I'm 35 now, so a lot.
So basically, between the two of us, we're completely unemployable. Sean doesn't work for anybody. So Carter's the only hope for this group. But I think we've come together as like passionate mavericks to be like, there's got to be a better way to solve this. I cannot watch another local government delete all their PDFs because they can't deal with it. Transparency is fundamental to democracy. And if we don't have trust in institutions, which is under threat today, then we will fail in our mission to empower communication and connect communities. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about is like this problem and how do we solve it? So Carter, I want to open it up to you. Like, what is the state of PDFs today for you as a screen reader user?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think a lot of people listening and watching this have experienced a very similar thing, right? You see a PDF document on a website and there's this internal feeling of dread. You don't know whether it's going to work. You assume it's not going to work. And there's a spectrum from a PDF that's been a bunch of pictures kind of sewn together, scanned in with nothing else added to it. We've seen those many, many times. You have the documents that have been scanned in and a little bit of text added, but it's hundreds of pages of just unstructured information. And then you have the documents like the ones that Sean creates that are excellent, but they unfortunately require a ridiculous amount of time to actually get right and to tag correctly and to send over to users to make sure that they're able to navigate them with all of the assistive technology that they use. And when you're dealing with this DOJ legislation, I've heard so many people say, well, we have hundreds of thousands of documents. We want to make them perfect, but Sean's only got so many hours in the day, and there's no possible way to do it through conventional means. Now, most people, when they think of a PDF, they're going to think of the Adobe Reader, which has made some pretty big strides in the last couple of years, especially to try and create accessible versions. Of course, it still relies on being tagged. You have Microsoft Edge and Chrome in your browsers that open PDF documents as well. And maybe you can read the text, assuming it wasn't scanned, until you run into structural information like a table or lists, at which point you get all of the information read out to you at once. So in summary, it's a pretty wild world out there.
Yeah. You know, I've heard stories like when Colorado was passing HB 211110, which is a law that would require accessibility not only websites but documents, passed a few years ago. You know, there were horror stories. Like a woman had a wildfire evacuation notice read to her one letter at a time. It was a PDF. It had been, you know, put in uppercase or something, and it was reading it like a giant abbreviation. Like, Sean, you know, is this easy for local governments to make these adjustments? Like, what are you encountering when you're training people on this?
Yeah, it's tricky. There's typically two methods that we train to organizations. It's the primary method is start with accessibility in mind. Open up a fresh Microsoft Word document and enter your data with styles, and then convert it to PDF and validate. However, if you're working with a PDF that has been given to you, or that you are editing yourself, maybe from some other legacy platform, or even like some online tools that create PDFs, when you go to edit that document, let's say in your case of having the single letter read out, oftentimes you would need to actually update a certain property, or you have to literally change the text in the document. So what feels like some simple process to like swap out a few letters, what tends to happen is as soon as you hit that edit button in PDF and you try to change some letters, it will actually strip the tags out of that entire container for that object in the PDF. So something as simple as changing a couple of letters can turn into, unfortunately, an hour of work, depending on the context.
Yeah, and we're seeing this at the local government level, where board clerks are going to trainings and they're like, I'm barely making my agenda packet deadlines. How am I supposed to do all of this and get those right and figure out my multi-page tables? Like, they're losing their mind over this, and they're worried about the impact. And then we see on the other end, in universities, faculty are preparing lesson plans and they're trying to make sure that things work. And MathML even alone is pretty sketchy and hard to get into documents.
I would just add into there, like one thing that we see a lot with, I work a lot with educational institutions along with government, but more education. What we see a ton of is the print to PDF feature. And, raise your hand if you've ever been personally attacked by the print to PDF feature in the chat. But honestly, what it does is it strips out all of your styles and tags. And so seemingly, even if you did all of the hard work in your source program, it is so easy to accidentally create a terrible PDF. And that at scale is just like such a problem that people are looking to solve.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm raising both hands over here, just for a little bit of context. And it's one of those things that even if you do have a good amount of time, you might miss some things, right? But in the event of that wildfire notice that was just very much inaccessible, when you're on a tight deadline, as much as we want to think about doing accessibility right and properly, and even if we do have the templates available, it's just not feasible in a lot of circumstances. And I think that's something that, at least as an accessibility practitioner, I've had to talk about before. And we almost want to dance around it sometimes because it's the elephant in the room, that it's just so much work for so many people.
So we believe that the hardship is behind us. The delays when it comes to doing this, the delay for users with accessibility to have to wait, days after a request for accommodation for an accessible version. We want to make accessibility instant, and we're excited to talk about sort of the first sort of product in this kind of category that can provide near instant remediation. So Carter is actually going to demonstrate for us the experience. He's going to show us the old way and the new way.
For sure. So to kind of get this started, I want to start with the math and university angle. When I bring up math, I think there's probably a thought that everyone has, like people are cringing a little bit. And I know specifically when I was going through university and having to deal with math content all over the place, it was extremely difficult. I mean, we have a STEM problem in our community in that it's so difficult to actually render this properly. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my screen reader so you're able to hear it. And I'm going to go ahead and use the legacy way, which is I'm just going to view a document with algebra equations in the browser.
Stop share. Alt plus S button. Math is algebra plus homework. Math is algebra 715 x plus equal heading level 1 equations using the MS header square root 3 x plus a right parenthesis n equal participants can now see right k and heading level 1 equations using the MS header square root 3 x plus a right parenthesis n equals n area summation n k right parenthesis n minus k n k equals 0 math ml version 0 n k n.
So I'm sure that sounds very familiar to a lot of people. And I don't know how someone is supposed to read through this equation, figure out what they're supposed to do, and figure out where the punctuation is. This is normally the experience when someone gets a PDF of math content. Now I'm going to go over to our solution that Mac is going to talk a little bit more about.
Building permit application. Newsletters. Acme district document. Button. Visit link download original PDF.
So right now we're looking at a PDF document, the same one that I was looking at before, and it's visually presented on the screen, so it's readable. Now,
document viewer frame show and skip to accessible content link.
If I show and skip to the accessible content, now I'm going to jump down.
Algebra question 1, question 2, heading math equations using the MS header. Math fixed math ML heading.
And seamlessly, what it does is translates that ugly, awful equation into
m over 6 equals 3. M over 6 is equal to 3. Heading level 2 square root of 3. The square root of 3. Left parenthesis heading level 3. Left parenthesis x plus right parenthesis the n equals the sum from k equals 0 to n of n choose k times 6 to the k times to the n minus k. Open parent x plus a close parent to the n th power is equal to quantity.
And so what this does is it presents it in MathML in a way that I can actually interact with a screen reader.
Open parent x plus a n of math. Open parent x is equal to quantity sum with n above k is equal to 0 below n of math. N of math is equal open parent x plus a close parent to the n th power.
And so I'm able to look at that equation and I'm able to dig down as deeply as I want to actually read what it's telling me, which is the typical MathML experience. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how is this possible? Like, there's a lot of error here when you have a document, you're just trying to convert it into a machine readable equivalent. I'll let Mac talk about that in just a second, but I want to talk about local governments for just a second. So what we see a lot of when it comes to local governments are PDF documents, and again, hundreds of thousands of these documents just sitting there. A lot of them were scanned. Some of them were just taken pictures of with an old camera. I'm going to show you probably the most egregious example of this that I have seen in recent memory. And what this is going to be is a building permit that's actually handwritten. So someone writing this down on a piece of paper and then taking a picture of that and throwing it over to a PDF.
Document fake. Building permit applications 1987.
And this is a building permit application from 1987. Now, what you're going to see here normally, if you use a screen reader, is graphic on each and every page. Now, what I'm going to do is through our DocAccess viewer,
show and skip to accessible content, same page link.
I'm going to click the show accessible content.
Switch to accessible transfer to document container main landmark. This document building permit applications 1987, 1988 heading level 1. End of fiscal year heading level 2. No next heading. Handwritten note near bottom right of page. Calculation / annotation. 1987 88 PT7. Page 8 separator. SW for 1987 /88. Handwritten letter entries transcribed in reading order below. Table 14 row 1 column 1 date. Building permit letter enter date.
And so what you have here is every aspect of this document being rendered in clean, friendly HTML. You even have this table down here, which, you know, in any PDF, tables are difficult. In handwritten PDFs, tables are basically impossible.
Row 2 10/87. Row 3 11/87. Applicant /business column 2 regional. Row 4 regional. Amount column 3 $400. Permit no column 4 SW 87/88 Row 5 SW 87 table SW amount column 3 $2,000.
So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and hand it over to Mac to talk a little bit more about the solution, how it works, and our approach to solving this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this has been a humbling problem to take on. And I think what we've learned is that we cannot make the mistakes that have been made in the past around overlays and tools that sort of where technology inserts itself and makes an inaccessible problem even worse. So what we began with is a service that integrates Ira, which is a trusted, human there to assist. And then on top of that, we added AI-based transcription that takes the document and it moves it into a fully transcribed document. And it's helped overcome some of the things that Sean Jordison has pointed out, like the MathML limitations within PDF. And instead of creating PDF, it creates HTML. So instead of relying on the annotation layer, which is kind of the separate part of the PDF that is hidden to everybody, it actually takes the accessible view, reads out the alt tags, reads out everything, and puts it in full public view of what is being accessible. Like, we're making the accessible view accessible. So some of the ways we're using it right now is DocAccess can take all of the PDF links on a page and rewire them to open in the viewer. So the print-friendly version is there for the traditional expectation, but alongside is the accessible transcript view where you can ask questions, you can get that live assistance, you can even get a live translation. And that is what is made possible, because of the HTML-based modern format. I don't want to say death to PDF, but if you say it, Sean, and you say it.
I'll say it. Is this thing on? Death to PDFs.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's one of those things where we have to usher in a more modern format. But for whatever reason, there's so many reasons, that is where everything is stored today. But it's time to invite a mobile-friendly format, which is not currently possible in PDF. It's time to invite other ways that we can take on document accessibility. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to just cover some of the edge cases that we're running into. So we started this idea of, well, can't we just feed to ChatGPT a PDF and say, why don't you write accessible HTML? And, that got us up and running, but it was so much more than that. And so I just want to share some of the lessons we've learned so far, the challenges we faced, what we're excited to have solved, and what we're looking forward to next. So the first big thing, we used to process every page, one page at a time, and there were so many issues that came from that. We would get also issues like when we just submit a big thumbnail of a page, AI would hallucinate. Like, it thought this was a picture of Manhattan. But we added model control protocols to actually allow the AI to decide where it wants to zoom in and what it needs to see. And now this is the transcription. It now describes that this is an easement map of Auburn Valley Country Club. Now, for the record, I can't read this even if I look at it, but the AI can zoom in and understand, what is this historic document? And it can add things like legends, line symbols, notes, easements, and describe the map and have an alt tag that's readable. Another thing that's come up is big images of graphs. We've all seen that giant graph that turns into a 2-paragraph alt tag or long description, which has intermittent support, I'd say. And now we have the ability to actually provide a synopsis, like, what's the takeaway from this graph? And then a companion table with each chart. So, like, Carter, like, why do we need companion tables with every chart?
Yeah, really good question. Something we were talking about internally quite a bit. When you have a diagram, you may want to do two things with that diagram. You may want to just get an overview of, what is that diagram telling me? Is it conveying a certain trend? Or you might want to dive really, really deep into the diagram and say, okay, in 1999, the number of cases increased by 15%. If I'm in a meeting and someone's showing a diagram, I usually just want a general overview of what that diagram is trying to convey. So to do that, we have the alternative text, and the alternative text really summarizes what's in that table, like the trends, the key data points, the things that people want to know if they're just skimming the information. If that's not enough, you can just jump straight down into that table and get all of the same data points that you would visually.
And what about when there is no source table provided? So this is a big one. Like, what about pie charts? What about pie charts that are in 3D? Well, here is like where we especially need to make sure that we're providing source table data, even if it's not there, even by performing approximations, and when necessary, doing geometric extraction, correcting for 3D perspective distortions to measure the size of the area and relay it in a table. And so, like, Sean, if people want PDFs to be accessible, like, is part of a remediation service, like, do you add companion tables to graphs? Is that feasible?
Typically, it's not possible unless, so some clients like to go above and beyond. Some clients are like, Sean, here's the source file. You can take it into Word and alter it, but the real life scenario is typically not. It is a lot of effort to reflow text in a PDF. It typically is 100 times faster to literally recreate the document. Now, with a lot of training and intentful speaking with content creators, I've had a couple of clients that now when they develop, they actually they create the table and include it. But that is like an organization that's really putting in effort, and not that other orgs aren't, but typically it's not something that you add in during the remediation process. If anything, we use our best human minds to develop an alt text description that articulates the entirety of that graph in 125 characters or less if you follow my methods. But the table aspect here is such a cool feature. I just have to say, like, for faculty and staff that are creating charts and graphs, the ability to have this table generated to me is just like the biggest mic drop of this product in general. So I love that feature so much.
Yeah, and it seems easy to do on the surface, right? But anyone who's fed a PDF into ChatGPT, Claude, whatever your friendly AI that you haven't hit the rate limits of today, it's going to, if you have a table that spans multiple pages, once the page ends, it's processing it one page at a time. It's going to forget the entire context of that table. The alternative text, every time you're going to have to tell it how to describe content in good alternative text. And it's just not feasible at scale.
And I would say it's very manually intensive. Like, this is, with all due respect, a very simple, like, look at that bar chart. There's a bar chart on the screen right now, which shows a whole bunch of complexity for a 3-year summary revenue budget by funds for year 2023 through 2025. Imagine the alt text on a bar chart that has all of that data. It is a lot. And the fact that we can get that as tabular data, I mean, the time it would take for me as a specialist to rewrite that data in tabular form, probably 30 to 45 minutes to accurately, adjust my columns and row headers and get the data in there. I mean, it is a lot to ask for that level of detail on a 400-page budget report at the end of the year.
Yeah, and how much would that cost to manually remediate per page?
It ranges, but at the minimum, $10 a page, up to $25 a page.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, provide a living wage. I mean, it's like, and I think what's scary is that so much remediation work is being outsourced. Like, people are overwhelmed. They're not going to Sean and getting, the great accessibility guide treatment. It's being shipped off to the Philippines, other places. People are working 50 cents an hour, $1 an hour, cranking these things out. And if you look at the annotation layer, like, which very few people do, they don't go through the tags editor and check everything. It's like pretty disastrously off in many cases. And you don't get a summary of complex documents, and it's weeks behind. And I think that problem, if you multiply it to the billions of pages, $10 a page, like, people are concerned.
Yeah, and if I might add to that, one of my clients I was working with, pretty large local county, about a week and a half ago, was telling me, we would love to remediate all these PDFs, but we're going to find the cheapest option, because if there were to be some legal action, we would throw it on them. And obviously, no one wants to think that this is how people think. Very transparent people kind of speaking what everyone unfortunately has in the back of their mind, but it's just not feasible at that point. And we want people making PDFs accessible for the right reasons, not so that if the job is done wrong or whatever, they can just blame it on the PDF remediation company.
Mm. Yeah, isn't that crazy? They seek indemnification. But I think that's the question of the public expense, because it's such an unreasonable problem to solve. And, one of the big things that was a breakthrough, and, Sean, you've always been an advocate of this, like, when you write an alt tag, you don't want to just say a street with a stoplight undergoing maintenance. You want to say Elk Grove Boulevard with your Measure X dollars at work renovating stoplights. Like, you want to include the meaning, but the meaning might not be on that page. And so we have to understand the document's intention as a whole in order to properly transform into HTML. So another classic example, here we're looking at the San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District, and it's notes to basic financial statements from their auditor. This is something they get from their auditor, and good luck having auditors attend an accessibility seminar on their PDF exports. You know, they're scrambling to get it done as it is. But like on every single page, there is San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District, and then this right underneath it, notes to basic financial statements. But what is actually meaningful on this page is notes to basic financial statements. That's what differentiates it from the pages that precede it. But Carter, having to deal with this page, if you just had an AI mindlessly translate it and maybe a remediator translate it, you would end up with your heading 1 is San Mateo County Mosquito Vector Control District on every single page over and over again. That is incredibly annoying and unhelpful when it comes to a table of contents and to the heading structure of the document as a whole. Because in HTML, one HTML page has to include the entire document. So we have to change the format here. And so what we actually do in DocAccess is we've learned we can ignore the heading 1 that's repeating. We put it in a header tag as a div. And then the notes to basic financial statements actually comes forward as the H2. And then we have a table of contents that makes sense. We have a heading order that makes sense. There's just one heading 1 on the page, and that is the title of this annual report as a whole. And so that really cleans up the table of contents, but it's not intuitive. Like, we have to pre-process the entire document and have all this metadata available before we can process any page of the document in order for that to work. And when we do a page, we have to think about, you know, on this page that there might be small text. So we might need to zoom in and send slices, understanding that the patches at which, you know, the current visual models like GPT-5, like they can actually not see that higher of resolution. And it's amazing they do as well as they do, but we actually need to send slices and tiles. If there's a large table, we need to run independent logic to make sure that the tables add up and that they have the right information. And most importantly, we've even learned, like, when you have pages that repeat, one of the pages might not have table headers, but we need to have table headers on every page to be accessible. So we need to first process and transcribe the original start of that table first before we can process the subsequent pages. And we still need to get this done in a matter of minutes. You know, that is our charter. So the things that used to be impossible, like diagrams and flowcharts that used to just say, hey, here's a flow chart of the organization. Well, that now is possible. We can actually do unordered lists for organizational charts, for flow charts. You can jump with ARIA labels from anchor to anchor inside of that item list, and you can choose your own adventure right through the unordered list. Like, this should be a standard. I want everybody to be able to read and understand an organizational chart, a flow chart, and more. And what I think is especially cool now is inside of this, and you can see this even on the page, that there's now an implementation log where, using reasoning tokens, we actually make sure to get the verbose output, and we make sure that not only the initial transcription, but even the quality control agent are documenting what they're doing and why. It says in text here, where I as an administrator can look at this page, and it will say, I'm preparing to output this heading, but I understand that I can't, you know, this can't be the heading 1 because of this other reason. And so all the decisions it makes, it documents. I know we had one case of a building permit that had a crazy number put into it, actually by the clerk for whatever reason. And our system made that red and highlighted and said, this might be a mistake. There is so much to do when it comes to transcribing documents. We're so grateful for all the local governments who have been part of this beta, to Carter and others. Like, it has been so nerve-wracking to know that there could potentially be inaccuracies, but it was Carter, who does the testing and approval, who said, Mac, it's time for this to ship. Like, I know it's not, all these pieces are not perfect, but at the core of all of this is our ability to communicate and our ability to have functioning democracy, which relies on transparency and free communication, and our ability to learn in a university setting to make sure that faculty can get at their content without being encumbered by, you know, all of the different nuances and technologies around accessibility. In today's age, we believe that technology can rise to solve that problem. I want to thank the Vista Center for all of your hard work in putting this on. I want to thank Sean and Carter for the tireless efforts, as well as our whole team of engineers behind the scenes at Streamline and DocAccess that are committed to this. And we hope that with your help and input, we can continue to make the mission of make every PDF accessible by helping it transition to HTML can come to life. If you want to learn more, check out docaccess.com. But thank you to the entire team, to this conference, and to all of you who are participating. We look forward to building great things together.